I was declared dead on March 7, 1998. My police report described the incident as fatal error and mischievous irresponsibility, after finding out that I was behind the wheel with a blood alcohol content of 0.355, or about 4 times over the legal limit. I'd been at a party with a bunch of college buddies the night it happened. We'd been chasing vodka with Sprite, Coke with whiskey, double shot on double shots, a few Michelobes here and there, and throw in some margaritas for the ladies. In short, we weren't pacing. It was the end of finals week, and we'd gotten too rowdy, myself mostly. I never intended to drive, but I'd reached a point where I wasn't making any logical decisions, zero critical thinking, and my buddies weren't aware enough to stop me as I got into my '72 pickup and peeled out of the driveway without even saying goodbye. Oh, the irony. I don't remember exactly why I'd left, but my house was only a few miles down the road. My vision was very blurry, the lines on the road crisscrossing just in front of the hood of my car. My stereo was turned all the way up, blasting Sweet Home Alabama. One portion of the drive crosses over an old steel bridge. The steel was a rotted red and orange. The rust had eaten a good portion of it. I guess that's why my truck easily broke through it, instead of being stopped by it when I swerved to miss another car coming from the opposite way. Before I knew it, I was upside down in the cab, taking on water. The truck must have done a 180 backflip, landing topside. I'm surprised I didn't get knocked out in the process, seeing as my seatbelt wasn't on me. I was in such shock and drunk that I took a few seconds, upside down still, before I realized what was going on. Once I came to, I put myself right side up, my feet now resting against the ceiling of the cab. Water was somehow seeping quickly into the truck. Within what I imagined was only a minute or two, my feet had been in at least 2 or 3 inches of water, just above the toe of my shoe. I tried opening the door, but that didn't work. I broke my hand trying to punch the glass, so I resorted to kicking. Nada. I was so drunk I decided to quit trying. I was defeated and nearly blacked out. There was no way out. It all felt like a dream, so I closed my eyes and listened to the bubbles and the water tanking in. I've always had the fear of drowning and burning alive. I'm sure a lot of you would agree. Had it not been for me being so belligerently drunk, I might have cared, might have induced a heart attack from the fear, but I was too wasted. As time went on, the water climbed. Within minutes, it was above my waist. A few more, and it was above my neck. In the end, my face was pressed against the floor, and I was drawing in my last breath before the entire cab was underwater. It was very cold. I couldn't really see anything at this point either. The truck had sunk far enough down into the pond. I don't think I was able to hold my breath for very long, maybe less than a full minute. But in my final moments, I remember punching the water sporadically as my lung forcefully inhaled water in its final attempt to get oxygen. I then felt dizzy and the world went dark. I woke up in the hospital a few days later, my throat sore from having been intubated and a bunch of IVs hooked up to my body. The EMTs on the scene apparently tried CPR, but failed to resuscitate me. They declared me dead, but then several minutes later, I started spitting up water. I'm just happy to be alive. What if everyone thought you died, but you woke up several days later, only to be encased in a box, 6 feet underground, with no way to call for help, but hoping someone heard your violent thrashing screams? Back in the 19th century, bells would be attached by rope to the casket, so that if you were still alive, you could jerk the rope and ring the bell to let anyone nearby know. Nowadays, this isn't standard. When was the last time you'd seen a bell above someone's grave? Probably never. It's estimated that 1 to 2% of all burials are premature. You'd think embalming someone would do the job, but I looked it up. It's not legally required and isn't used in all cases. What's even more fascinating is what's called the Lazarus effect, a phenomenon where the heart starts beating again sometime after being declared medically dead. Now, whether those two things I've explained have anything to do with one another is still up for debate, but I think it's real. I think I experienced it, except I wasn't the one buried 6 feet under. Graveyards aren't just for mourners. Some people desecrate while others procreate, though I couldn't see how a graveyard could set the mood, but to each their own. Then there's the third group, those trying to speak to the dead. Myself and several friends thought it'd be a great idea. No, a fantastic idea, to pick up a Ouija board at a Spencer's and take it to the cemetery. I've always been freaked out by those kinds of places. Last time I went to one was when my grandmother passed away. I was about 9. I couldn't stop thinking about how she could still be alive as they were dropping her down into the ground. A part of me wanted to stop everyone and open up the casket just for one last check, just to make sure she was really gone. Since then, I've avoided places like this. I haven't even visited her burial since then either. Probably never will. I don't even remember where she was buried. I thought to myself, wouldn't it be funny if we were going to the same cemetery Grandma was buried at, and she screamed your name from down there? We'd finally pulled up to the cemetery and walked around for a while just examining the headstones. One of my friends, Sarah, said we should find someone who passed away recently, as it would be easier to make contact. She'd been reading mumbo jumbo online, but it freaked me out nonetheless. We all settled around a stone where a man named Henry Fitzgerald lay silent in a cold, rotting box a few feet below us. Or so we thought. He'd passed away just a few days prior. His burial was so new that the topsoil hadn't grown even the tiniest piece of grass. We put the Ouija board on top of the topsoil and all sat in a semicircle in front of his headstone. Sarah was to be the one to ask Henry questions, and I didn't mind at all. I already wanted to leave. We put our hands on the planchet and Sarah began with a, "Hello, Henry," which sent chills up my spine. She got to the part where she requested a sign, maybe a strike of lightning or the howl of a wolf, or maybe, just maybe, a knock from the grave. We sat still for a little while and waiting, none of us letting our hands off the planchet. I thought I heard something, but it was faint. I rested on my side and put my ear against the topsoil. Boom! There was a knock, all right, loud enough for everyone to hear it. I jumped like a Mexican jumping bean onto my feet and sprinted back to the car. Everyone else followed, except Sarah. As I was running, I could hear Sarah screaming, "You can't leave without saying goodbye!" Do you have an irrational fear? Maybe the fear of the dark, the fear of insects, or the fear of clowns? They're irrational because they're manufactured in the mind. There's no real threat, per se, so where does it stem from? Some would say childhood trauma, as in my case. I've been going to therapy since I was a child, and I've never told anyone but my therapist about what happened that triggered my phobia. There were these bullies at school, the typical hotheads that seemed to prefer violent to vent, usually targeting the little guys like me. Most methods of torture were textbook: wedgies, some kicking or shoving, or at worst, shoving someone into a locker until they heard one of the teachers close by. I guess they'd gotten tired of going by the book, so one day after school, I'd graduated from punching back to super mega punching back for their messed up experiment. They'd caught me on my way to the bus lot right after the last bell, walking between the science and math buildings. Jimmy Ryder was the mastermind, if I had to take a guess. He'd always been their little ringleader, the bully of bullies. Sometimes I could see on the others' faces that maybe they feared him, and that was why they did what they did, or else. Jimmy squealed at me like a pig, pointing. I was a chubby kid back then, just another reason to be picked on, I guess, though nobody deserves it. Several of them grabbed me by my appendages, one for each arm and each leg, and pinned me down on the asphalt. Jimmy had something in his hand that looked like a jar. I could barely see when I lifted my head up to look at him, but as he walked over, settling right on top of me, I could see what he was holding. There had to be a dozen of them in there, buzzing around madly. I could hear the sides of the glass jar thumping. Jimmy grinned, then asked me, "Do you know what these are, nosebleed?" "Horseflies?" I told him. "Uh-huh, but these are special ones. Got them from my uncle's horse ranch. He says the females are the ones that bite. I had one bite me, and boy was it painful." He showed me the welt on his arm. I figured I'd save a few of them for somebody special. He brought the jar close to my ear. The glass rattled against the side of my head. I side-eyed the jar. They must have been as big as my thumb. I tried to break free, but they were sitting on my arms and legs. I remember them laughing at me, those jerks. Jimmy lifted the glass away from me and slowly twisted the lid of the jar, smiling in the process. My stomach started convulsing from the terror, and one of my eyes started to twitch. He got down to his knees and pretty much sat on my stomach, lifting my shirt up in the process. That's when he pressed the jar against my chest. The bites were worse than I had imagined they would be. I could feel their little mouths ripping into my skin, so many flashes of pain to the point of numbness. I passed out. When I woke up, Jimmy and his gang were gone. My chest was bright red. There were tiny welts with holes where they'd bit into me. Looked like 100 of them. I tried hiding it from my mother when I got home, but she caught me in the kitchen late at night grabbing some ice to throw on it and immediately took me to the ER. Doctor said I'd be fine, but that I should watch out for infection and take the proper precautions. My mother was so furious that the next day she went to my principal's office and had Jimmy Ryder and all his buddies expelled from our school. It was a win, but to this day, I have this terrible fear of houseflies.